There's a lot of discussion as to whether coffee has any role to play in terms of stimulating new hair growth or preventing hair loss. So let's discuss it together. There's a lot of shampoos, conditioners, and hair loss medications that are incorporating caffeine. But is it bullshit, or does caffeine actually help promote healthy hair? Well, there are three theories. Theory number one is that if you apply caffeine topically to the scalp, it's acting as a vasodilator. That means if you have a blood vessel like this, it's opening that blood vessel so it's really big, and it's allowing oxygen and nutrients to flood into the scalp, and that's important for growth of your hair follicles. Theory number two is that caffeine is blocking a hormone known as DHT, dihydrotestosterone, and we know that DHT is a major contributor for hair loss for both men and women. Now, what it's not doing is it's not blocking the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, and if you block that enzyme, you would decrease the amount of DHT that would be floating in your bloodstream. Instead, it's blocking the actual molecular structure of DHT, and thereby it can't bind to an androgen receptor to cause hair loss. And theory three is that it decreases phosphodiesterase. And when you decrease phosphodiesterase, you increase IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor. And we know from a lot of research that IGF-1 plays a massive role in terms of promoting new hair growth and putting the hair follicles into the growth phase known as the anagen phase. But now we have to take a closer look at the research so we can really understand, is caffeine effective at preventing hair loss, and does it really have any role in terms of stimulating new hair growth? Unfortunately, the research to support the efficacy of caffeine is very weak. We don't have any clinical trials that have looked at caffeine, but we do have laboratory research. The laboratory research does show that caffeine has a role to play in terms of prolonging the elongation of the hair shaft. It does have a role to proliferate keratinocytes, which is important for cellular activity and growth. And there is some evidence that caffeine also blocks testosterone's ability to bind to the hair shaft, which is wonderful news, because if that truly is the case, then it can prevent hair loss. Now, there certainly have been clinical studies that have looked at caffeine as a solo application where you apply it topically to the scalp, and then caffeine infused and mixed with other hair loss regimens, mixed into shampoos, incorporated with finasteride or minoxidil or Procapil, or used in mesotherapy treatments. Now, if we look at the research where caffeine is used as a solo application, it's not that strong to conclude that caffeine has an impact in preventing hair loss or stimulating new hair growth. But if we look at the studies where caffeine was incorporated with other hair loss treatments, there is evidence that caffeine does play a role, that it does help stimulate new hair growth and prevent hair loss. In fact, we have seen when it's incorporated either with finasteride or minoxidil, the results are superior relative to finasteride or minoxidil being used as solo treatments. Now, there has been a study looking at minoxidil in comparison to caffeine, and they do both help prolong the growth phase of hair follicles, but minoxidil wins out every single time. Additionally, finasteride has a completely different mechanism of action in comparison to caffeine. Remember, finasteride blocks the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, and it decreases the floating DHT. And caffeine works differently because it blocks the ability for that molecular structure to actually work, the DHT molecular structure to work, so that it can bind to an androgen receptor. So combination therapy seems to be very effective when caffeine is incorporated. Now, finally, we get to caffeine-infused shampoos. And there is some evidence that when you incorporate caffeine in a shampoo, the caffeine is very effective at penetrating into the hair shaft within a very short period of time, about 2 minutes, and helping to strengthen the hair shaft as well as increase the density of the hair shaft. Now, there's a well-known hair shampoo known as Alpacin, and they did their own study and they demonstrated that when you use this caffeine shampoo, it helps to prolong the growth phase of the hair, it prevents hair loss. However, the UK in 2018 force them to take this claim down, because remember, there has not been any clinical trials to actually support that caffeine is effective as a hair loss treatment. With that said, patients still have positive claims about this product and other hair shampoos with caffeine because they do find that they're being beneficial. I just want to emphasize the following. I'm not against using caffeine in a hair loss routine, but I don't think it should be the only treatment. I don't think it's going to be effective enough to prevent hair loss, and it certainly won't be effective enough in stimulating new hair growth. So that's a wrap. We talked about caffeine shampoos today. If you have any questions about this particular approach to addressing hair loss, leave your questions below. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'm here on your journey to address your hair loss.